What's up everyone, it's Victon here with another Path of Exile build guide. Today we're going to be going over a build guide for a cursed bot Occultist that specifically supports a Carrion Golem build. With this build I ran in a party of 2 with myself supporting a Carrion Golem Elementalist, but this could work for supporting any version of Carrion Golems, or even any version in general that only deals physical damage and no elemental damage. We ran this setup so we could super juice tier 16s with 100% Delirium. Basically, the goal was to beef up my Carrion Golem partner's build so we could crush those in-game super beefy Delirious maps and make some mad currency along the way. Using this method, we were making about 4 exalts profit per map, and we were able to run about 4 to 5 maps an hour, so in total we each profited around 9 exalts per hour with this setup. So overall, a huge success that made us a ton of currency. So I thought I'd share, and hopefully some of you out there running Carrion Golems could make this build or get a partner to run this build and start crushing the hardest tier 16 100% Delirious maps in the game. One additional nice thing about this build, I was able to use some of my gear from my low-life ES version of Carrion Golems in this build, so it helped speed up the gearing up process and in the end turned out to be not that expensive to set up. Even if I hadn't had some of the gear in the first place, the cost of setting up this build is actually pretty low considering how much you make back in profit. You could easily pay for the gear investment in one night running this setup, so really not that bad at all. With that being said, and before we get going here, if you end up enjoying this video or any of my many other Path of Exile guides, give this video a like and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Also check out the link to my Patreon in the video's description if you're interested in helping out the channel and getting some juicy benefits along the way, like access to my Patreon and YouTube supporters only Discord channel, as well as personal build reviews and assistance. Anyways, let's jump right into it and kick off the build guide with the skill tree. After that, we're going to go over the gym setup and finally the gear required to make the magic happen. Alright, so first things first here, we're going to be using the desktop app Path of Building. A link's going to be in the description for you to download it if you don't already have it. And it's very important to note that if you get an error in Path of Building, it's because you're not using the Path of Building I have linked in the description. It's the community fork Path of Building. It's updated more frequently and overall it's just much better than the original. Once you get it, just copy the POB pastebin link in the description of this video. Then we're going to open up the app, go to the top left here, and click Import Export Build, and then click Import from Pastebin, and then paste the link here, and import, and you will be good to go. So the way I do my Path of Buildings is I typically have a leveling guide built in so you can see how to level it up from start, from your first lab all the way up to a level 100 character. This guide is slightly different in that it is much more of an in-game build guide, and you do 0 DPS, so since you're supporting your map partners to beef up their damage, leveling as a curse bot is definitely not the way to go. I personally suggest leveling this as a spellcaster of some sort that doesn't require too much investment on the tree, so you don't have to spend too many regrets to respec your tree once you finally made the switch to curse bot. I personally switched around level 85 and it was pretty smooth from there. I was able to start supporting my Carrion Golem partners build in juiced tier 16s at level 85, so not too bad. Now for the build here, I'm basically going to go over all the big passive nodes in the skill tree. And we're going to start off by saying that you end up being low life with this build, so we can put out some more auras as well as curse. Since we only had 2 people in our party, it was important to do this. Not only was I providing amazing curses, but I was also giving out some decent auras, so it made the build kind of an all-around great support character. Being low life, we of course pick up as much energy shield as possible where we can, so here, 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 and here. These are going to be some good ES clusters. We end up with just under 6,000 energy shield, so not too bad, and we're going to be surrounded by an insanely buffed temporal chains and feeble, for example, on blasphemy. Moving on though, another key part of the build is getting as much mana reservation as possible on the tree, so again we can run those curses and auras. When all is said and done, we will have picked up this cluster, this one right here, this one, and gotten these points here as well by socking in an intuitive leap, which allows us to allocate nodes without being connected to the tree. Using this jewel saves us 3 points, which we desperately need to use elsewhere. And speaking about saving points, make sure we kill all the bandits so we can get those extra 2 skill points. Now we also pick up some great curse nodes with skittering runes and of course whispering doom for the additional curse. This node is extremely important since we end up with 3 active curses running on blasphemy. From there, we should start talking about the cluster jewels, as they are a huge part of the build, and for the most part, luckily our cluster jewels are not that expensive. The first being our most expensive. We get a Voices large cluster jewel. Now, that might sound scary at first because of how expensive they can get with the fewer small passive skills it grants, which is obviously better, but honestly, I just use the cheapest version at 7 small passive skills. One which cost me about 135 chaos at the time I purchased it, and it's working just fine. If you have the currency to get a 5 passive skill one, feel free, it's basically going to give you some extra points to use to boost up your maximum energy shield, and the 3 passive one is even better of course, which is going to give you some additional medium clusters. And inside that Voices large cluster jewel, we're going to be putting in 3 medium cluster jewels, all having the following 2 passives: Exploit Weakness for Vulnerability Curse Effect, and Forbidden Words for more Curse Effect. Reduce mana reserved for your curse effect, and most importantly, area of effect for your curses. It turns out that area effect for your curses is one of the most important parts of the build. Being able to curse an entire screen of enemies makes clearing these beefy maps much easier and smoother. Now, for 2 of the 3 medium cluster jewels, we're also going to be using small cluster jewels inside of those. And for these, we're going to get ones with 3 passive nodes with energy shield, with ideally some added strength and dexterity, and maximum energy shield, but really anything works here. More importantly is the final passive, Energy from Naught, which gives us a whopping 100 maximum energy shield, which is huge. So those are the 3 medium clusters in our Voices, but we also are going to have a solo medium cluster jewel socketed over here. We don't have the points for a large cluster jewel, but hey, if you're Mr. or Mrs. Moneybags and can afford that 3 passive Voices, you can opt for a second Voices here and get an additional 3 medium cluster jewels. That's ideally the min-maxed way to go here and will provide you with an insane boost to curse effectiveness and curse area of effect. But for those that are trying to keep the budget a little bit lower, just socket a 4th medium cluster jewel here and you will be just fine. For this one, we do want Forbidden Words like before, but also a single Evil Eye passive. This makes enemies cursed by you take 5% more damage and causes enemies to be blinded for 4 seconds when you first curse them. It's a great defensive boost and worth the points. Now, lastly here on the tree are 2 jewels we haven't mentioned yet. The first being Efficient Training, which gives us a ton of strength, which we desperately need. The second is a Might of the Meek, socketed right here, which boosts affected non-keystone passives in its radius to have 50% increased effectiveness. It ends up being a ton of great stats, all of which benefit us quite a bit. We also have a few regular jewels here and there, which we're just going to pick up Maximum Energy Shield, Strength, and Dex, as well as all elemental resistances. Moving on to our Ascendancy, we will be going Occultist, as the obvious choice here being that it is the best for curse build. We're first going to pick up Profane Bloom, so we can curse hexproof enemies in maps. This is an absolute must-have. From there, we get Malediction for an additional curse and some curse effectiveness. And then from there, we're going to get Vile Bastion, mainly for stun immunity, but also a bit of ES regen per second. And lastly, we're going to pick up a Void Beacon for a bit of reduced life regen rate for nearby enemies. And that's it for our passive tree, so let's go ahead and move on to our gem setup. First and foremost is our helmet with our curses. We're going to go over the helmet choice more in the gear section, but it does give us a level 30 Blasphemy for free, which is then going to support our socketed Vulnerability, Enfeeble, and Temporal Chains, which is also supported by an Enlighten of at least level 3. These 3 curses are our bread and butter of the build and massively debuff enemies around us, making them attack at the speed of snails, barely have any hit chance, and do significantly less damage and take significantly more physical damage. From there, let's move on to our boots, where we're going to have 2 links. The first being Blood Magic and Purity of Ice. Again, we're going low life here, so using Blood Magic is going to reserve life instead of mana. For our second 2-link, we have a Cast when damage taken and Immortal Call setup. I personally have them both at level 20. And for our shield, we have some auras that are in our Prism Guardian, so they have Blood Magic by default. We have a Vol Haste, Vol Grace, and Purity of Fire. And quick note here, it's best to get as much quality on your auras as possible for that additional area of effect so that your partner is getting all of the buffs all of the time. Moving on to your weapon, we're going to socket in a Flame Dash or Dash, both with Anomalous for travel distance increase, Enhance, and Second Wind. This combo makes your dash a crazy far distance, and it's very fun and effective while doing these really tough maps. For our gloves, we're going to have some utility skills, the first being Frost Shield, which gives us a nice defensive boost while standing in it, Void Sphere to pull in and group up enemies, increased area of effect, and Second Wind. And lastly, for our chest piece, we have at least a 4-link in a 6-socket with Vitality, Purity of Lightning, Vol Discipline, and Enlighten, at least level 3, followed by an enduring cry and urgent orders. And that is it for our gem setup, so let's go ahead and move on to our gear choices. First and foremost is the most important item in the build, our Heretic's Veil Helmet. This gives us level 30 Blasphemy, which allows us to cast our curses as auras around us. This is absolutely huge and central to the build. I chose to pick up one with a Corrupted Implicit of +2 to level of Socketed Duration gems, which boost our curses. Remember that you can buy one with the wrong colors or sockets, and use the bench to craft those colors and links using Vol Orbs. Next is our shield, which is a Prism Guardian. This is what allows us to go low life and reserve several additional auras. I personally went with a corrupted one that has physical damage taken as cold, fire, or lightning, whichever one you can get, since we do end up ending with 80 to 82 maximum elemental resistances. And for our weapon, we got an Ephemeral Edge, which basically just gives us great energy shield boost, and I got one with corrupted increased area of effect, which again makes our curses AoE much better. For our body armor, we have a Shavron's Wrappings, which again pairs with the Prism Guardian shield to allow us to run auras reserved as life instead of mana. And for our gloves, we're going to get a pair of Vixen's Entrapment, which gives us additional curse and some nice energy shield. For our boots, we have Wind Shriek for a further +1 to maximum curse, and really good area of effect for our curses, along with a decent bit of movement speed and all resist. For our amulet, we're going to pick up a Star of Rayclast for even more curse area of effect, and some decent elemental resistances as well. For our rings, we do get 2 replica Diodri's Damning, which makes us have 1 fewer maximum curse, but it gives us a total of 42% increased curse effectiveness with the 20% caster catalyst for a total of 84% total between the two. This is huge for both defense and DPS, and the minus max curse is actually fine because unlike other curse bots that need to run a ton of curses for elemental damage like LA Weakness, Frostbite, and Conductivity, our partner is only using physical damage, so vulnerability is all we need and 3 max curses is perfectly fine for us. And just to reiterate here, without these 2 rings we have a maximum of 5 curses in this build, but add in these rings and we are allowed only a maximum of 3 curses, which again is perfectly fine for us. For our belt we use a Darkness Enthroned, which boosts the abyssal gems inside of it by 75%. We get 2 jewels just like this, with high energy shield, strength and dexterity, and high all elemental resistances. This ends up being a fantastic option and is super cheap. For our flasks, we have a basic setup here with Enduring Mana Flask of Dousing for Ignite immunity, a Movement Speed Flask with Movement or Freeze immunity, a Jade Flask with Curse immunity, a Quartz Flask with Bleed immunity, and a Rumi's Concoction for some nice attack and spell block chance. And that is it for our gear section, which brings us to my final thoughts on the build. Overall, this setup has been fantastic for running those mega buffed burial chambers with 100% Delirious, Breach, or Blight. We throw on Gilded Ambush, Breach, Legion, and Harbinger Scarabs, and run Beyond as the Xana mod, with Alva as the master mission, and my god, these maps can get insane. We typically end up with about 12 to 13 rewards in the Delirious stages, which, like I mentioned, ends up being about 9 exalts per hour per person. So a fantastic way of farming currency. Also, overall, the setup really wasn't too expensive to get going, especially considering I made back the initial investment in only 1 night map session. I would definitely say this curse bot setup was a huge success, and really allowed myself and my Carrion Golem partner to shine. It makes the enemies do significantly less damage, and his Carrion Golems do significantly more damage. And hey, in general, mapping on those giant maps with thousands of monsters is just plain fun and always a good time. It just takes the right builds to be able to finish those maps, and this combo here is perfect for it. If you're interested in a Carrion Golem build, you can currently check out my Low Life ES Necromancer Golem guide that I have on my channel. And spoiler, I do have a full in-game build guide coming for a life version Elementalist Carrion Golem, which should be coming out by the end of the weekend, so check my channel if you're interested in that as well. As always, if you enjoyed this guide or any of my many other Path of Exile guides, hit that like button and consider subscribing to my channel for more content just like this. Also, if you've been enjoying my content and want to support the channel, I do have a Patreon setup where you can support the channel as well as gain access to my Patreon and YouTube member-only Discord server, where we chat about these build guides, and I'm always available to help you out with your build by doing build reviews. And new to the channel, I have also set up a YouTube membership where you can subscribe to the channel directly through YouTube. I actually didn't know this even existed, but do have it set up now, and with subscribing through YouTube, you also get access to the Discord server, so another great way of supporting the channel. And thank you to all of my Patreons for the support. It really means a ton, and I greatly appreciate it. That's all I got on this one. Thanks everyone, and I will catch y'all in the next one.